Good morning. So thank you for having me here with you. Beautiful day in Montreal. Very picturesque. So my name is Terence Tirella. I am a product manager with Salesforce. I've been with Salesforce for a couple of years, focused on our commerce platform. So very happy to be here sharing some information with you this morning. Of course, if you've seen a Salesforce presentation before, you know it's coming. I'd like to remind everyone that we'll be talking a little bit about some features and products that aren't yet available. And if you're making any purchasing decisions, make them on the currently available product. So I wanted to start just by talking a little bit about the success that all of our customers on the platform have had, including many of you, this past holiday season. Maybe hard to remember now, but it was only a few months ago that we had a really tremendous holiday on the platform. All of our customers having a tremendous amount of success, are really incredible growth numbers that we're seeing on the platform for new and existing customers. They really speak for themselves, and a global reach for the brands that are on our platform, the retailers. And really just congratulations, especially to all of those of you who are with us on the platform, and hope for those of you who aren't might be joining us next holiday to share in this success. And a big part of this is really what we're talking about today is about bringing experiences for our customers for an evolving shopping experience that's constantly evolving. We heard about that this morning. Meeting those, that rate of change, that faster and faster rate of change. We have a number of stats here about the growth that we're seeing in terms of year-over-year growth. And the numbers, again, sort of speak for themselves. I think one of the things that is super interesting right now is the growth in mobile orders being placed. So we all know that mobile traffic is incredible and has been growing. But what we saw this past year was for the first time on our platform, more than half of the orders were also being placed on mobile devices. So if we've been in the mindset in the past of mobile is a browsing platform and then the purchasing platform is something else, that really hasn't been true for a little while, but it's definitely even less true now, where we see 55% of orders being placed on mobile devices. But again, really just a tremendous amount of success happening and growth across the platform, across many different brands. I have a few more stats here. Again, just looking at a variety of brands that are on our platform and the different amounts of success that they're having, including many of them having record amounts of sales for their holiday period, for their Black Friday, their Cyber Monday, and all of that is made possible by the tools and the platform techniques and the capabilities that we have as part of the Commerce Cloud platform. Again, just kind of looking at these numbers and seeing the growth. And some of the things that are super interesting as well that we're seeing are the omni-channel engagement. So if you've enabled buy online, pick up on store, you're not only seeing greater conversion and improvements in your performance on your mobile site, on your online site, but also an impact that's happening in your retail locations as well. So really just tremendous growth. And what we'd like to talk about this morning is what are the tools and techniques that are providing the foundation for that growth. And so we sort of think of the platform as supporting the experiences that you want to provide to your shoppers, and maybe more importantly, thinking about the experiences that your shoppers are expecting, and then providing you with the tools to create those experiences in a variety of ways. One phrase that you'll hear us talk about a lot is this concept of clicks to code. What we mean by that is providing both declarative experiences where maybe a non-developer or a merchandiser is able to go and make changes to their site to change the copy, the images, using WYSIWYG tools, CMS type tools, but also that coding experience. So typically if you're looking to provide a super differentiated experience, it's going beyond that beaten path, providing the development tools for IT teams to implement really whatever experiences that you've envisioned, perhaps working with your partners to explore what changes you're looking to make to that experience. And we're looking to provide you with all of the tools you need to be successful in those endeavors. Wanted to talk in particular about one customer that's a great example of the variety of experiences that they have, and not only that they are using these different experiences, but they're using them in really interesting ways. So I had the pleasure of working with Shiseido Group in November at our Dreamforce event and learning about how they're using the different tools that we have. So this is a massive health and cosmetics and beauty brand. They've got many different brands. They're fully global. They're doing business all around the world. And they're using lots of different approaches to providing their customers with the experiences they want. And so we provide a reference architecture, which we run and operate on our platform. Some of you might have used it, previously known as Site Genesis. Currently, it's known as the storefront reference architecture, which is a bit of a mouthful. And this provides an out-of-the-box experience that meets e-commerce best practices for desktop, for mobile. It's easy to implement. It has the support of our declarative tools, like our Page Designer, which we launched last year. Now, what Shiseido Group has done is they've taken that platform, which we provide, and they've internally made their own reference implementation for their brands. So as they roll out to new regions, if they launch a new site in APAC or they roll out a new brand on the platform, rather than taking our generic experience, they've got their customized version of it. And so it already has some of their particular best practices built in, and it makes it easy for them to bring those best practices to that brand and to that market. They're also using mobile native experiences. So for their brand Bare Materials, they have this really innovative mobile app where you can take a picture of your face, take multiple pictures, and it'll make recommendations about what cosmetics are appropriate for you to use. So a good example of some heavy coding implementation, but it's also integrated to their commerce experience. And so using the APIs that are part of our platform, they're not only able to make these suggestions about these products, they're also then able to convert those customers and bring those recommendations into their commerce storefront, but they're providing it at that touch point. So you don't have to leave the iOS app or the Android app. You can convert right there thanks to the implementation they've done and the power of the platform with the API-driven commerce. They've also partnered with Mobify to build out PWA applications. And so you can see this variety of options that they've exposed to their customers. And so regardless of the customer's looking for a more engaging experience through a mobile native app where they have that unique capability, or they're looking for a seamless experience in their browser on their mobile device with some app-like functionality through a PWA, or if they're browsing on a more traditional storefront, Shiseido is offering those experiences, and so the customers can opt into whichever experience that they'd most like to engage with. Another thing that's interesting, and I think there's a bit of fact and fiction or a myth busting here, is that this isn't an all or none proposition. And so what you see with Shiseido Group is by region, by brand, really by customer segment, they're providing the experience that those customers want. So when they build out a native app, they don't necessarily need to build it for all of their brands. They can build that app tailored for that experience, and again, it's connected back through the APIs. When they roll out a new site experience, they are choosing what level of customization they're making in that brand. And so for some brands, maybe a more flagship brand or a region that's more strategically important, they can choose to invest more time in customizing that experience. And then for others, maybe they're looking to get launched faster, and they maybe follow later with the customizations that take a bit more time. They can roll out that faster site and then bring in customizations later. And so there's sometimes a misconception that if I'm going to build, say, a headless storefront, or I'm going to build a mobile app, I need to do my entire portfolio or perhaps even my entire experience. And the reality is that you have the flexibility to choose and target the experiences that you're trying to provide and choose the right tool for that. We'll probably talk a bit more of that with Drew in a bit about how you can mix and match these different capabilities to create experiences and to sort of iteratively move into a new type of experience and explore some of the new technologies. And so one of the things we're very excited about actually this month is we're going to be bringing some new development tools into the market, launching a beta. And what we're really focused on with these new tools is more API-driven commerce. And so our SFRA, our Site Genesis experience, those managed storefronts that are part of our platform, those continue to be a great option. But what we see, especially for customers that are looking for maybe a more bespoke experience, or they've got integrations that are more challenging and more API driven, or in many cases, they've already built out a headless or API driven storefront on a different platform, and now they're replatforming onto Commerce Cloud. They need API driven experiences, and they need the platform to support their API driven technology choice. And so what we're launching is a whole new developer experience to support that API-driven commerce. There's a lot of new technology that we're bringing to bear here. Things like RESTful APIs, which isn't a new technology, but we're reinvesting in the APIs that are part of our platform. We're bringing out a new SDK, which provides developers, if you're building on the Node.js platform, with an accelerated path to creating custom applications. We're exploring technologies like GraphQL, which is a really interesting technology for sort of shifting the balance in how you interact between client and server applications. And we're bringing all of this as part of our new developer experience, and it's all wrapped up in a new enablement platform, our new developer center, which allows for developers, administrators, IT professionals to come and learn about these new platforms, to try them out, to learn about how they work, so they have the skills they'll need in order to be successful with these technologies. And so that Developer Center is actually going live next week. And so whether you're a customer or even if you're not in the beta, this will be fully available for you to explore and to learn more about the tools and techniques that we're bringing into this developer experience. We heard a little bit this morning about some of the complexity of working with partners and the value of having effective partnerships. And often one of the things that comes with those partnerships and that kind of growing ecosystem of partnerships is a growing ecosystem of complexity that needs to be interconnected to provide an omni-channel and a cohesive experience. One of the tools that is super effective at connecting these different systems and having that API ecosystem is MuleSoft, which is part of the Salesforce family. And we're also introducing an accelerator for Commerce Cloud that is a part of the MuleSoft ecosystem. So if you are already a MuleSoft customer or curious about MuleSoft, the accelerator for Commerce Cloud provides a pre-built integration, so the APIs that are part of our platform can easily be interwoven to the other APIs that you might be managing in your MuleSoft solution. So just another option, especially if you think about the complexity of integrating legacy OMS, ERP type systems, in-store systems, and providing that omni-channel experience. And with that, I want to thank you and introduce Drew Lau from Mobify, and we're going to have a bit of Q&A and chat.
Okay, cool. Well, let's take a seat. We're going to have this amazing fireside chat. By fireside, we mean fire extinguisher chats. And we'll make this a casual kind of product geek discussion because we're both leading product teams at Salesforce. We're going to talk about just really what we observed. So I'm going to lob the easy question to get started, warm up a little bit. I noticed we're wearing the same shoes. Yours are much cleaner than mine. Did you buy it on desktop or mobile?
I did not purchase these shoes. These were a gift. My daughter, who's 2.5, every time I put them on, says, bought daddy new shoes, which she did. So that's how I got these.
It's adorable. My 3-year-old has not bought me shoes yet. How did you do that? All right, so we're going to start a bit with, you've shared a bit of the kind of the new strategy around headless and getting to APIs and how that means, I guess your customers have options of how to deploy their storefronts now. So what interesting projects have you seen? We've worked on a couple already, but in the general Salesforce space, what projects stand out and that have gone headless, and what kind of results have those seen based on your wide set?
Yeah, so I think one of the things to recognize is that headless isn't new, right? And so there's a lot of buzz about headless, but actually our commerce platform has had APIs for a long time, the OCAPI Open Commerce APIs, and so in some ways, there's this new buzz about it, but it's not necessarily a new technology. And so first, I think that there's been a lot of interesting implementations of different types of storefronts. Typically, headless is sort of it's the storefront experience across the board, but actually API integration happens in a number of different ways. And so, talked about Shiseido's implementation. We have a number of customers that have, a full mobile storefront. They've got PWAs. They've got a variety of different ways that they're using a headless approach or an API-driven approach to provide those different types of experiences. And I think that's something that's maybe not necessarily well understood because there's such a buzz about you have to go headless, when in fact, even customers that are talking about going headless, they might already be doing API-driven commerce through different channels. So maybe it's a chatbot, maybe it's a social integration where they're doing API-driven commerce already, but they might also be running a more traditional storefront on Commerce Cloud where they have a site gen site that's been performing very well. And so I think that that ability to be flexible is not always well understood, but it's super super important.
That's interesting. Yeah, a lot of our initial products when we first connected and with the Astound team have been around like kind of experiments on the mobile side. So we've seen, for example, working with say Lancome, L'Oreal Group down in New York with your team. We've seen them experiment a lot with like new capabilities on your mobile devices as example of how to how to keep in front of what Johnny calls the pace of change, I guess. So for that one, very similar to the Shiseido Group, they had kind of a augmented reality just on your phone directly in your browser where you can try on. For me, it was like pink lipstick, which made total sense, lovely, and looks like a Shiseido Group that where we also combined a bunch of that was taking snapshots of your face with your camera, uploading it, getting recommendations. Those are all new things that we're seeing kind of emerge as they are using APIs. They're not really headless in terms of like, oh, that's how we build it, because we don't talk about how we build it very often. But there's a good examples how you're trying out new technologies like progressive web apps, like VR, AR capabilities, as ways to like launch a lot of experiments, measure them, and see if you roll them out a bit more broadly. So I think we've seen that also with Patrick and Anwar. You're going to talk about a lot of your experiments and your pace of innovation there as well. And that is really where we started, was the PWA as a progressive web app. So the thing that I think we've noticed is actually underlying how teams have changed their approach as well underlying that. So, for example, when we looked at one of our other customers in Debenhams in the UK, we noticed their teams were actually now, with a new headless setup, were able to go deploy changes on a daily basis. So they're deploying 8 times more than they did before. And you think about how much that compounds. When Raja was talking about these kind of test and learn experiments. The more test and learn cycles you get through, the more compounds with yours. So what could have been a small change now adds up to many changes that all impact your bottom line. So that's kind of the pace of change we expect from headless, is getting to the experimentation factor.
And can you talk a bit more about the changes you're seeing in the PWA space? So like headless, PWA isn't necessarily a brand new technology, but it's an evolving technology.
Yeah, so it was very much like mobile-oriented first, as it makes sense. We're trying to work with the Google team on creating app-like experiences on the web, and that I think we based, like, you'll see Patrick's kind of results of like what that project, like, numbers look good, and then I think what we saw was, oh, let's go take this to other touch points. How do we take this to tablet? How do we take this to desktop? And I think what we've seen is, as you try to take it to other experiences, shoppers have been trained differently on desktop than mobile. So what makes sense on mobile, like, what is my opt-in rate for push notifications? How often do I launch my PWA from my home screen on my phone? Doesn't really apply that well to desktop. You're not really going to launch your storefront from your menu bar on your laptop. You're probably not going to sign up for as many notifications because you're not trained for that on desktop. So there's a need to measure and experiment that on a per channel or per touchpoint basis. But I think we're seeing that shift, though, also in how teams organize themselves. So before, we would have seen like a mobile product manager, a desktop product manager, and they own that specific touch point. Now we're seeing teams gonna kind of get spliced the other way. Instead of mobile, desktop specific, it's now I own search, I own navigation, discovery, checkout, and across all devices. And then I can decide if I should apply this new thing coming from a PWA space to my my search experiences versus someone else deciding that on checkout experience. And those teams are able to experiment in parallel instead of only doing one single deployment on mobile or desktop at a time.
And I think that internal recognition that there's a need to shift, whether it's culture or whether it's organization, is super important. One thing that we definitely see as we talk to customers that are perhaps interested in exploring more API-driven commerce is it's really critical to understand your internal skill sets, your internal level of sophistication. Again, I think one of these misconceptions sometimes is that do headless if you're big, or do headless if you have a big budget, but that's really not what it's about. It's really about figuring out what technologies are right for the problems that you're facing, but then also, as you go to implement them, figuring out the right pathway for success. And so, I think it is true that if you're going down a more API-driven experience, going to a more headless experience, multi-touch point, it is more sophisticated, and so it requires a greater level of sophistication. I think that's where having effective internal structures, organization, culture, having effective partnerships, having partners that understand that landscape, that can engage with you and understand the problems you're trying to solve, and not just bring technology to bear for technology's sake, but really to understand what technology is applicable. And I think there's just that level of recognition is even more critically important when you're taking on a more sophisticated approach to creating customer experiences.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when Johnny talked about the 5 pillars of digital transformation, obviously we love the partner side because that's where we sit. But understanding the skills of your people, understanding the culture, how to educate them, and also how to get to data is a big part of that. And we see that all the time with the customers. But you had luxury coming from working on digital transformation projects from various brands before coming to the kind of the vendor side. How did that many years of experience leading digital transformation kind of influence your roadmap, your vision of where a lot of the Commerce Cloud product goes next?
Yeah, and I would say I think one of the things that is a core value at Salesforce is a focus on customer success, and I think that being engaged with customers, with prospective customers, understanding what it is that they're trying to solve, is just it's a critical element to being successful in building a great product. If you're not engaged with your customers, if you don't have the feedback loops that you get from A/B testing and data-driven analysis, you're not going to build a good product. And I think that in the past, even only a year or two ago, as we were having conversations with our customers. And thinking about, what's the right solution? Is it the site genesis type solution, the SFRA type solution, or is it an API-driven solution? I think we didn't necessarily realize always where the customers were. And by going through that conversation and by understanding where our customers were in their digital transformation lifecycle, we kind of uncovered some of the motivations behind those transformations. And one thing that kind of emerged from that was understanding that for a number of customers that were coming to us saying, we want to build headless, what we realized is that they already went headless because they were frustrated with the pace of change in their old platform. And so if you were on an old on-premises commerce platform, and you weren't able to keep up with the rate of change that your marketing partners, your customers were expecting, headless kind of was an end around. So let's go build a React storefront in front of our platform so that we can kind of not deal with that old system back there in the closet. And I think one of the ways that we've been thinking about things is how do we help that lift and shift type customer so they can easily adopt our platform. We've seen a number of good successes in the past year where they're happy with their storefront. And so when they come to us and say we want to go headless or we want to stay headless, in fact, it's not about a total replatform. It kind of fits into this theme of kind of change what you need to change. And if you're happy with your storefront, but you're not happy with your merchandising platform, your back-end platform, it's not keeping pace, it's not stable, it's not trusted, it's not going to hold up for the next holiday season, you can do that lift and shift where you don't have to change everything. You mentioned working with Google. Google has been, kind of the godfather of PWA, and in some ways, I think that sort of created a perception that this is a Google-only initiative, and certainly in North America, where Apple phones are kind of more prominent, there's been kind of some concern, I think, about the adoption of PWA more broadly, but that's sort of been changing more recently. What have you seen in terms of the broader adoption of the technology from vendors?
Yeah, seeing Apple finally adopt it kind of tipped the game for us a little bit in that, okay, well, if you think most of the retailers in the room, generally a lot of our brands are very, especially in North America, iOS-oriented. So if this feature wasn't supported on iOS, I'm not interested in rolling it out because, again, if you're trying to get the statistical significance of trying out a new feature, if you don't have that many users because your audience is mainly iOS-based that you can't actually roll this out to, there wasn't really a drive from a lot of our customers to test that out and see what works and what doesn't. So that was probably the biggest change. Unfortunately, with Apple, they tend to do a lot of their development in isolation, so they don't really give you a heads up what's changing. And so what we're seeing, though, between Microsoft, Apple, and Google over the next couple months is they're going down a path of protecting user privacy as much as possible. And then that makes sense. They're making decisions for what's good for their end users, but also what we have to adhere to as product teams. So the change that I'm looking at next is they're already changing this in terms of like being able to detect via what's called a user agent if you are on a mobile device, a tablet device, or a desktop device. In the past, you would be able to use this user agent to kind of change just your mobile experience and be like, okay, this is a mobile user, I can adapt my experience just for this mobile user. What the browser vendors are trying to do is they're trying to hide that so you can't use that information in malicious ways, because you could fingerprint someone and say, this person, I know them, this is exactly who this person is because their user agent is unique, and I can fingerprint you across multiple sites, which is an invasion of privacy, generally speaking. So they're taking away that capability so that us as kind of product teams can't actually make decisions on what's based on mobile versus desktop. It's based now on screen size and orientation, and that changes how you have to think about things. You have to make your decisions on what you show to a shopper a bit more fluid because it could be a tablet oriented one way versus another way, and how is that actually different than a laptop that has kind of touch screens? It's now going to force teams to think about how to track data and then create experiences in less of a fixed device perspective, more of a spectrum of what's possible on these devices.
And you sort of see that in some of your newer implementations where it's not, let's build a PWA for our mobile device, it's let's build a PWA as our storefront.
Yeah, and that's great. I think that's what we want is getting to simplify a lot of the actual technology so that you don't have to learn like 3 different things across 3 different channels. They're all going to be, PWAs, they're all storefronts, they're all headless, they're all using the same APIs. There's no difference in experience between them. And that's important. We want that consistent experience all the way through. So, example of that is we originally started a bunch of our products just on mobile. We grew them all the way to desktop. And what we saw after we made that change to desktop is a lot of these teams now are doing a lot more of these experiments more often. So as Rajal talked about, like this test and learn cycle, we went from one customer that had deployments every two months to deployments every day, basically. And they're doing like 8 times more experiments. So they're able to actually roll out changes that are specific to just parts of their catalog. So they, for example, experimented with how do I see the impact of quick look. So if you're on the product listing page and have a quick look feature, what products does that quick look work for? So in that case, a quick look could be, it's not as useful for furniture products, surprisingly, because you actually want to go see your couch in a bit more detail. But it works well for menswear because, shopping behavior, I just want to quickly look at this thing, not click through too many things and just complete the checkout. So what they found out was if I roll a quick look just for these 3 or 4 categories, I can get a 7-digit impact to my revenue numbers. Whereas if I rolled it up broadly, I would have had like less impact because some shoppers wouldn't actually want to use that feature, and their ability to test that in a quick 2-week cycle meant that they can actually influence their bottom line that much, and then just compound that across the other 10 or 12 active experiments they're running at the same time, and trying to just get that all deployed across all their devices.
Yeah, we just rolled out a new feature with Einstein called Complete the Set, and I think we're seeing some similar examples of what you're talking about, which is that targeting the experience. The experience doesn't necessarily apply to the whole site or to all of your categories. Especially if you're a large retailer, we might have different experiences that you're trying to create, and the segmentation we were talking about earlier is a great example of that. And so this Complete the Set feature, which is really cool in terms of creating matching product assortments that have, in apparel and accessories in particular, where you're buying a jacket, you want to have, a shirt, a pocket square that looks good. Maybe this was chosen by
This is a fake pocket square.
This is a fake pocket square. It's challenging and it's time consuming as a shopper to go and pick all of these pieces, and the way that your site might be organized, the fake pocket square, maybe not, but the real pocket squares are probably in a whole different category. And so the Einstein Complete the Set capability recommender brings all of those in and can put them together and create matching content. We had a great beta program and a lot of good feedback from our customers. And one of the nicest things we heard was that you couldn't tell which recommendations came from Einstein versus which were bespoke from a merchandising team. When you think about that kind of leveraging technology to augment your team, we talked to customers where their merchandising team, members of their team, all they were doing sets. And these are sets that change seasonally. You have to respond to inventory in and out of stock. And as you can imagine, it's a very laborious process. And so now you can bring in this Einstein recommender, but you might want to have that bespoke experience for key categories. So maybe you have a custom experience for a particular season or a particular brand that's part of your portfolio, and you're building custom content for that. But then on other parts of your site and other categories, you roll out the Einstein recommendation where you know that you didn't have the staff, and the time to roll that out more broadly, but you can target those particular experiences. I think that's such a, that mix and match capability, whether it's clicks and code or it's different storefront touch points, that ability is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think shaping the usage of a technology based on your team and how much time they have or how much little time they have is important. I think traditionally we've seen a bit of the fear of the machine. Like, I'm not sure if I want to give up all my responsibilities to this algorithm that's running somewhere. But if you think about it, like, a lot of teams don't have enough time to run all the experiments and track the data and then see what happens. So, kind of mixing and matching that with technology that will run like 80% of the things under the scenes and then specialize on that top 20% to optimization is probably the perfect mix we're trying to look for from trying to bring AI machine learning into the hands of various retail teams. Generally, I think that is our fireside chat, fire extinguisher chat. Hope you enjoyed it. We will then set this up for Patrick. I think we teed it up pretty well for him.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Q&A. Okay, we could do additional QA while Patrick sets up. Any questions for Terence or the Salesforce side? Oh, we have, okay. We'll start with this table here.
Okay, Grégoire Barret, working at the Alto Group. One question around the privacy topic you just covered. We know that the current new rules, especially ITP and other subsequent way to protect consumer privacy, are kind of conflicting with any tracking, attribution, and personalization type of features online, especially on websites compared to apps. How do you see PWA being possibly a solution or a way to better deal with that? Because what we see emerging right now is native applications becoming the best location for truly personalized and instantly logged type of experience, while web is becoming a more tricky because of that new type of rules where we clean up after 24 hours all the data cookies and all of the stuff we need to use. So how do you see this playing versus PWA?
Yeah, okay, so how do we see privacy and changes in privacy playing with the new technologies like progressive web? So I think that's kind of the balance that a lot of these browsers are trying to strike is how can I create a good user experience that lets people opt into giving marketing teams more information and not doing that in a way that they don't know they gave up that information. So how do I consciously actually make that an active step in the shopping process? I think a lot of that comes down to friction. So a lot of our advice and guidance on checkout experiences is let people check out as guests, then add in section at the back lets you sign up for it afterwards. So that next time they come back, you can then have a bit more of their information that they've opted to give you as part of that. So that's like kind of the early version of that one. What we're seeing with the PWA space is like there is a lot of new technology emerging around automatic registration, automatic sign up, so that you can take your Google account or your Apple account or Amazon account and just automatically create your profile in e-commerce stores without having to go fill out 20 form fields. And that way you can opt into giving your information to retailers to personalize your experience in a way that is a bit more seamless. So that's all like very new things that are being experimented on now. And that's where like you're trying to give people a reason to opt in and not just bombard them with new things. So the other study that is more of a negative consequence of PWAs is the notifications you're getting for a lot of websites these days. They usually just pop it up right away, right when you land on the website, and that's like a very bad practice. And so the Chrome team just published a bunch of their stats of what the opt-in rates for those like upfront notifications are, and they're like abysmally low. They're like 90% rejection rates, which makes sense because you just don't want to ask someone to go, hey, give me permission to go bug you all the time, because even though we don't really know each other yet. So we're trying to look at what are the better practices around that so that you can choose to offer that opt-in later on in the process. Or what the Google team is looking at is trying to enforce, you can't ask that right away by adding in a bunch of additional things that need what they call user interactions, user gestures before you're allowed to go ask for something in terms of like additional permissions. So a lot of that is shaping a lot of the technology to fit kind of user experience practices so that you can encourage people to get to giving you that information, but not in a way that's invasive or just unusual.
And I think there are some misconceptions about what will work and what won't work in a more privacy-oriented technology space. You mentioned guest checkout. I heard yesterday, and I might get this slightly wrong, but we see about 78% of checkouts are occurring as guest shoppers. And so to some degree, I think there's some misconceptions about how much the privacy features are hurting the ability of personalization and recommendation systems. If you think about the broad amount of data that you need to feed into a machine learning algorithm, there's only so much of that that's actually being blocked by privacy, and there's only so much value in the sort of personally identifiable information. And so if you have a more comprehensive machine learning system like the Einstein platform, you're already dealing with that, and you're able to continue to evolve the way that you're building out recommendations. And so even as cookies get, the cookie apocalypse and privacy continues to get more and more litigious, you're still able to make important recommendations. I think the other factor there is you have to be compliant. There's just no way to work around that. It's increasingly complex. If you're a global brand, you're dealing with GDPR, Canadian privacy, California privacy. There probably will be a US privacy law at some point. The question is, are your partners, are your technology partners, are your implementation partners helping you be compliant, or is it falling on your shoulders? And for us at Salesforce, trust is our #1 value. And so being compliant, bringing the tools that help you be compliant with those privacy regulations, that's always the top line item as we're making investments in the platform. And so it shouldn't be a huge burden on you to maintain compliance, because it's just a cost of doing business. You have to be compliant.